The weight you refuse to drop. Imagine carrying a heavy stone on your back, not for a day, not for a month, but for years. Every morning you wake up with it. Every night you go to sleep with it. At first you notice the weight, but eventually you become so accustomed to carrying it that you forget it is there. You simply accept the burden as part of your life. This is how many people live, not carrying stones, but carrying the past. A betrayal they cannot forgive, a mistake they cannot forget, a relationship they cannot release, a dream that never came true, a version of themselves they wish they could become again, and without realizing it, they spend years dragging old pain into new chapters of their lives. The Stoics understood something most people never learn. The past has power only when we continue carrying it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that human beings suffer more in imagination than in reality, and often, the greatest source of suffering is not what happened. It is our refusal to let it go. Think about how much energy people spend reliving old memories, replaying old conversations, revisiting old mistakes, reopening old wounds again and again, as if somehow the past might change, as if enough thinking could rewrite history. But it never does. The past remains exactly where it has always been, behind us. Yet millions of people continue looking backward while trying to move forward, and then they wonder why life feels so heavy, why peace feels so distant, why happiness feels so fragile. The truth is simple. You cannot move freely while carrying what should have been released long ago. Epictetus taught that suffering often comes not from events themselves, but from our attachment to them. The event ends, but the attachment remains. The pain passes, but the story continues. The moment disappears, but the mind keeps returning to it. And little by little, the past becomes a prison, not because life trapped us there, but because we refuse to walk away. Today we will explore one of the most liberating lessons in Stoic philosophy: why people hold on, why letting go feels so difficult, and why true peace begins the moment you stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. Because sometimes, the heaviest burden in your life is not what happened. It is what you refuse to release, and perhaps the freedom you have been searching for has been waiting on the other side of letting go. Why we hold on. Why do people hold on to things that hurt them? Why do they cling to memories that bring pain? Why do they replay moments they wish had never happened? At first glance, it makes no sense. If something causes suffering, why not simply let it go? But the human mind is far more complicated than that, because holding on is not always about pain. Sometimes it is about identity. Sometimes it is about fear, and sometimes it is about the illusion of control. Long before modern psychology existed, the Stoics observed something fascinating. Human beings become attached not only to what they love, but also to what they suffer. A painful memory can become part of a person's story. A betrayal can become part of their identity. A failure can become part of how they see themselves. And over time, letting go begins to feel like losing a piece of who they are. Imagine someone carrying an old scar. At first, the scar is simply evidence of a wound. But years later, they continue touching it, talking about it, defining themselves through it. The wound healed long ago, but their attachment remained. This is one of the mind's greatest paradoxes. People often hold on to pain because pain feels familiar, and the familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. The unknown is frightening. Change is frightening. Moving forward is frightening. Because letting go means entering territory you cannot predict. It means releasing the story you have told yourself for years, and that requires courage. Modern neuroscience offers an explanation. The brain is designed to prioritize emotionally intense experiences, especially negative ones. This is known as the negativity bias. Our ancestors survived because they remembered danger. Remembering threats kept them alive. But in the modern world, this same mechanism can trap us. The brain continues replaying painful events, not because it wants to torture us, but because it believes it is protecting us. It keeps saying, "Don't forget, don't make the same mistake, don't get hurt again." And so the memory remains active. Long after the danger has passed, Marcus Aurelius recognized this tendency. He understood that the mind often creates chains where none exist, not because reality demands it, but because habit does. We become attached to old emotions, old grievances, old disappointments, not because they serve us, but because they have become familiar companions, and familiarity is difficult to abandon. Think about how many people spend years reliving a single moment: a rejection, a divorce, a betrayal, a failure. One event becomes the center of an entire life story, and everything that follows becomes filtered through that experience. Years pass, opportunities appear, new relationships emerge, new possibilities arrive, yet the mind remains trapped in a chapter that ended long ago. This is why Epictetus taught that freedom begins when we learn the difference between what belongs to us and what does not. The past no longer belongs to us. It cannot be changed, it cannot be corrected, it cannot be relived. Yet countless people continue investing their energy there, as if enough thinking could undo what has already happened, but it never can. The truth is that holding on often feels easier than letting go, because holding on is familiar. Letting go requires trust. Trust that life can continue. Trust that healing is possible. Trust that your future does not have to be defined by your past. And that is where transformation begins. The moment you realize that your suffering is not coming from the event itself, but from your attachment to it. Because once you understand why you hold on, you can finally begin to release. But there is another layer to this problem, a deeper wound, one that keeps millions of people trapped in memories they can never change, the pain of the past itself. The pain of the past. There is a strange truth about human suffering. Most pain does not come from the past itself. It comes from revisiting the past, again and again and again. The event happens once, but the mind can relive it thousands of times. A painful conversation lasts 10 minutes, yet someone may spend 10 years replaying it. A betrayal lasts a single moment, yet its emotional shadow can follow a person for decades. A failure happens in an instant, yet the memory of that failure can quietly influence every decision that follows. This is one of the greatest tragedies of the human condition. The past ends, but the suffering continues, not because life forces it to continue, but because the mind refuses to release it. Seneca observed that people suffer far more from memory than from reality, and modern psychology confirms this. The brain does not always distinguish clearly between a remembered experience and a present emotional threat. When you repeatedly relive a painful event, your body often responds as if it is happening again. Your heart rate changes, stress hormones increase, old emotions return. The wound feels fresh, even though years may have passed. This is why some people never truly leave their past behind. Physically, they move forward. Emotionally, they remain trapped. They build new lives while carrying old pain. They enter new relationships while fearing old betrayals. They pursue new opportunities while expecting old disappointments. And without realizing it, they allow yesterday to shape today. Marcus Aurelius warned against this. He understood that the mind often becomes a prisoner of memories, not because memories are powerful, but because attention gives them power. Every time you revisit a painful moment, you strengthen its presence in your life. Every time you repeat the story, you reinforce its emotional grip. The memory becomes familiar, the suffering becomes familiar, and eventually, the pain feels like part of who you are. But here is the truth. You are not your worst mistake. You are not your greatest failure. You are not the person who hurt you. You are not the event that happened years ago. Those experiences are part of your story, but they are not your identity. Many people spend years trying to change the past. Not literally, but mentally. They imagine different outcomes, different decisions, different conversations, different endings. If only I had said something else. If only I had stayed. If only I had left sooner. If only I had known. The mind becomes trapped in endless negotiations with reality. But reality never negotiates. The past remains unchanged. No amount of regret can rewrite it. No amount of guilt can erase it. No amount of overthinking can transform it. This is why Epictetus taught that wisdom begins when we accept reality as it is. Not because we approve of everything that happened. Not because the pain was fair. Not because the loss was deserved. But because acceptance is the only path forward. You cannot heal while fighting a battle that already ended. You cannot build a future while living in yesterday. You cannot discover peace while constantly reopening old wounds. The Stoics understood that healing begins with a simple realization. The past is gone. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. And every moment spent trying to change it is a moment stolen from the life still waiting to be lived. But there is something even more dangerous than remembering painful experiences. It is allowing those experiences to become the foundation of your identity. And that is where many people become truly trapped. When pain becomes identity, there is a moment when pain stops being an experience and starts becoming an identity. At first, a person says, "Something bad happened to me." But over time, the story changes. Now they say, "This is who I am." And that is where suffering becomes dangerous, because events are temporary, but identities can last a lifetime. Think about someone who was betrayed years ago. The betrayal ended long ago. The people involved may have disappeared. Life may have completely changed. Yet the person continues to see themselves through that wound. They no longer trust, no longer open up, no longer believe in others, not because of what is happening now, but because of what happened then. The event became an identity. The same thing happens with failure. Someone loses a business, fails an exam, misses an opportunity. At first, it is simply a setback, but if they hold on to it long enough, they stop saying, "I failed," and start saying, "I am a failure." A single experience becomes the lens through which they view their entire existence. The Stoics understood how dangerous this transformation could be. Because once suffering becomes identity, people begin protecting it, defending it, even nurturing it, not consciously, but psychologically. Why? Because the mind values consistency, even painful consistency. Modern psychology refers to this as identity attachment, the tendency to cling to a familiar self-image, even when that self-image causes suffering. The mind prefers a painful certainty over an uncertain freedom. This is why some people remain trapped in old stories for decades, not because they cannot leave, but because they no longer know who they would be without them. Their pain becomes their explanation, their excuse, their protection, their definition. And without realizing it, they build an entire life around a wound. Viktor Frankl observed something remarkable. Even in the darkest circumstances imaginable, people retained one freedom, the freedom to choose how they responded. Not what happened, not what they lost, not what life took from them, but how they interpreted it. And that distinction changes everything. Because your experiences shape you, but they do not define you. Your wounds influence you, but they are not you. Your past affects you, but it is not your identity. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that human beings possess the ability to examine their thoughts, to question their assumptions, to separate themselves from the stories their minds create. This is what makes transformation possible. The moment you realize, "I am not my pain," something begins to change. The chains loosen. The prison door opens. The story loses its power, and for the first time, you begin to see yourself beyond the wound, beyond the betrayal, beyond the failure, beyond the loss. You begin to see the person who survived it, the person who learned from it, the person who can continue beyond it. This is where healing truly begins, not when the memory disappears, not when the pain is forgotten, but when the pain stops defining who you are because there is a profound difference between carrying a wound and becoming one. Most people never learn that difference. And because of that, they spend years protecting an identity built from suffering. But the Stoics offered another path, a path toward freedom, a path toward release, a path toward peace. And it begins with learning the art of letting go. The Stoic Art of Release, letting go, sounds simple. But for most people, it feels impossible. Not because they do not want peace, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they confuse letting go with losing. They believe that if they release the pain, they are somehow minimizing what happened. If they stop carrying the anger, they are excusing the betrayal. If they stop grieving the loss, they are forgetting what mattered. But the Stoics taught something radically different. Letting go is not forgetting. It is not denying. It is not pretending that nothing happened. It is accepting reality without continuing the fight against it. Epictetus built his philosophy around a simple but life-changing idea. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Our thoughts, our actions, our choices. These belong to us, the past, other people. Lost circumstances, these do not. Most suffering begins when we demand control over things that were never ours to control. We want different endings, different outcomes, different histories. We want reality to be something other than what it is. And when reality refuses, we suffer. Not because reality is cruel, but because we are resisting it. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, fighting the wind, arguing with the rain, demanding that the clouds disappear. How long could you keep fighting? An hour, a day, a week? Eventually exhaustion would take over, not because the storm defeated you, but because you were fighting something that could not be controlled. This is exactly what happens when people resist reality. They fight what has already happened. They fight losses that cannot be reversed. They fight time itself. And the struggle consumes them. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Again and again he reminded himself to accept events as they unfold. Not because every event is good, but because every event is real, and reality is always stronger than resistance. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate. Not merely tolerating life, not merely enduring life, but embracing it, including the difficult parts, including the painful parts, including the chapters you never wanted, because every experience contains an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become wiser, to become stronger. The person who hurt you cannot control your response. The mistake cannot control your future. The loss cannot determine your character. Only you can decide those things. And that realization changes everything. Because the moment you stop asking, why did this happen to me? You begin asking, what can I do with what happened? You move from victimhood to responsibility, from resistance to acceptance, from suffering to growth. This is the Stoic art of release. Not erasing the past, but refusing to carry it forever. Not forgetting the lesson, but releasing the burden. Not denying the wound, but allowing it to heal. Because healing requires space, and you cannot heal while constantly reopening what should be closing. The truth is that letting go is not weakness, it is courage. The courage to stop fighting yesterday, the courage to trust tomorrow, the courage to live today. And when you finally learn that lesson, something extraordinary begins to happen. The weight becomes lighter, the mind becomes quieter, the heart becomes freer, and for the first time in a long time you can breathe again. But there is one final step, one final transformation. The freedom that appears when you finally put the burden down. The freedom of letting go. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the weight is gone. The burden you carried for years, the anger, the regret, the resentment, the guilt, the endless replaying of old memories. Gone. How different would your life feel? How much energy would return to you? How much peace would suddenly become available? Most people believe that letting go means losing something, but the truth is the opposite. Letting go is not a loss. It is a return to yourself, a return to the present, a return to the life that has been waiting for you all along. The Stoics understood that every moment spent attached to what cannot be changed is a moment stolen from what still can, and life is always happening in the present, never in yesterday, never in the memory, never in the story, only here, only now. Yet countless people continue sacrificing today's opportunities for yesterday's pain. They remain loyal to wounds that no longer serve them, faithful to grief that has already taught its lesson, committed to stories that should have ended years ago. And because of that, they never fully experience the freedom available to them. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on the brevity of life, not to create fear, but to create clarity. Because when you realize how short life truly is, you begin to question what deserves your attention. Does this old resentment deserve another year? Does this regret deserve another decade? Does this memory deserve the rest of your life? Most of the time, the answer is no. The problem is not that people cannot let go. The problem is that they wait for permission. Permission from the person who hurt them. Permission from the past. Permission from circumstances. But freedom never arrives that way. Freedom begins when you decide. When you stop waiting. When you stop negotiating. When you stop asking life to give back what it already took. And instead, you begin building with what remains. Because what remains is powerful. Your wisdom remains. Your experience remains. Your strength remains. Your future remains. The loss may have taken something from you, but it did not take everything. There is still a life ahead of you, still opportunities, still relationships, still purpose, still meaning. This is what Viktor Frankl discovered in the darkest circumstances imaginable. Everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the freedom to choose their response. And that freedom changes everything, because once you stop focusing on what was lost, you begin seeing what is still possible. The door that closed becomes less important than the doors that remain open. The chapter that ended becomes less important than the chapter you are writing now. The wound becomes less important than the person you are becoming because of it. This is the freedom of letting go, not freedom from pain, but freedom from being ruled by pain, not freedom from memories, but freedom from living inside them, not freedom from loss, but freedom from allowing loss to define your future. Imagine how your life would change if you stopped carrying yesterday. Imagine how much lighter you would feel. Imagine how much further you could go. Because the truth is, the stone was never chained to your back. You were simply holding it, and what can be held can also be released. The moment you understand that, everything changes. But there is one final lesson. One final realization that brings all of these ideas together. A realization capable of transforming the way you see your entire life. Put down the stone. Imagine holding a heavy stone in your hands, not for a minute, not for an hour, but for years. At first, the weight feels unbearable. Then something strange happens. You adapt. The burden becomes familiar. The pain becomes normal. The struggle becomes part of your identity. And eventually, you forget that you ever had the choice to put it down. This is how many people live, holding on to old grief, old resentment, old mistakes, old versions of themselves. Not because they want to suffer, but because they have carried the burden for so long, they no longer remember life without it. The Stoics spent centuries teaching a simple truth. Life is not made heavier by what happens to us. It is made heavier by what we refuse to release. The loss happened. The betrayal happened. The mistake happened. The chapter ended. But the mind keeps carrying what reality has already left behind, and in doing so, it turns temporary pain into permanent suffering. Marcus Aurelius understood that every human life is brief. Every year passes faster than the one before. Every season disappears. Every moment slips away. And because of that, one question becomes unavoidable. How much of your remaining life are you willing to give to the past? Another year, 5 years, 10? the rest of your life, because every moment spent reliving yesterday is a moment that can never be lived today, and life only exists here, now, in this breath, in this moment, not in the memory, not in the regret, not in the story. Here, the truth is that letting go does not change the past, it changes you. It frees your attention, it frees your energy, it frees your future. Because the moment you stop carrying what no longer belongs to you, you create space for something new. New experiences, new relationships, new opportunities, new meaning, new life. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when we stop demanding that reality be different from what it is, and perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all. Peace does not come from changing the past. Peace comes from making peace with it, not approving of everything, not forgetting everything, not excusing everything, simply accepting that it happened, and choosing not to carry it forever. Because the strongest people are not those who never suffered. They are those who learned when to stop carrying their suffering. The people who move forward are not the people who never experienced loss. They are the people who refuse to build a home inside their pain. And today, you have the same choice. You can continue carrying the stone, or you can finally put it down. The past will remain where it has always been, behind you. But your future is still waiting. Waiting for your attention. Waiting for your courage. Waiting for your freedom. Because sometimes the most powerful step forward is not taking something with you. It is leaving something behind. And perhaps the life you have been searching for begins the moment you finally let go. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to Timeless Philosophers, because true freedom begins when you stop carrying what no longer belongs to you.